She had just $5 in her pocket. No college degree. No backup plan. Just a second-hand sewing machine and a dream. While most 19-year-olds were choosing college majors or scrolling through social media, Mira was choosing between rice and rent. She lived in a narrow one-room home in the heart of Kolkata's old textile district. A leaking ceiling, a rusted fan, a bed shared with her father, who was too tired to dream anymore. Her mother had passed away when she was just 12. A sudden illness. No hospital could be afforded. It was the kind of trauma that leaves holes in the soul, but it also planted a seed. "I will build something," she whispered to herself one night, staring at the cracked ceiling. "Something that won't break like this house. Like our life." Every morning, before the sun touched the city's colonial buildings, Mira was up. She boiled tea over a kerosene stove, fed her father, then turned to her sewing machine, her only asset, passed down from her mother, who once stitched saris for a living. But this wasn't just about making clothes. Mira had something most people missed. She noticed everything. Every discarded scrap of cloth. Every woman walking with a plastic bag that tore in the rain. Every boutique charging 2,000 Indian rupees for a basic cotton tote. Where others saw trash, she saw opportunity. The first time she stitched something that wasn't clothing was almost accidental. A neighbor had tossed out a pile of old cordas, faded, torn, but colorful. Mira cut the cloth into squares, stitched them together, lined it with a used bedsheet, added a zipper, and made something nobody expected. A handbag. Handmade. Patchy, but beautiful in its own way. She didn't know it then, but she'd just sewn the first thread of her future. The next day, Mira walked 3 kilometers to the local bazaar. No stall. No fancy branding. Just a wooden crate, a plastic sheet to sit on, and that one bag. She placed it down carefully, took a piece of cardboard, wrote "handmade," 200 Indian rupees, with a black marker, and waited. She sat there for hours. People walked by. Some glanced. Most didn't care. A few even laughed. A teenage girl selling bags? What could she possibly know? Just as the sun began to dip and her hope with it, a woman in her 30s stopped. She picked up the bag, turned it over, felt the stitching, and asked gently, "Did you make this?" Mira nodded, too nervous to speak. The woman smiled. "It's different. I'll take it." And just like that, 200 Indian rupees landed in Mira's trembling hands. She didn't run home that day. She flew. That 200 Indian rupees wasn't just money. It was proof. Proof that what she had in her mind could exist in the world. That her hands, her creativity, her will, could create something that people wanted. That night, she didn't sleep. She stitched 2 more bags. Then 3. Then 5. Each one was unique. Each one told a story. She didn't have money for materials, so she started collecting scraps from local tailors and used bed sheets, curtain ends, even old denim jeans. To her, this wasn't junk. It was inventory. And so, while other girls her age were thinking about college exams or marriage, Mira was thinking about product lines. She created 3 collections. Rustic roots, bags made from traditional prints, denim diaries, rugged pouches from old jeans, color chaos, patchwork madness that somehow worked. She sold them outside schools, small stalls, and through local shopkeepers who agreed to give her a tiny corner. And people started noticing, not because she had a fancy logo, not because she was loud, but because each product felt honest, raw, real. Customers would return saying, "The zipper held, the colors didn't fade, and I could feel the care." At night, after her father slept, Mira would take out a notebook and sketch ideas. She had no training, no formal education in design or business, but she had one thing most entrepreneurs dream of, an unshakable reason why. She wasn't building a business just to make money. She was building it because it was the only thing that gave her life meaning again. Every bag she sold was one step closer to fixing the roof, buying medicine for her father, maybe, just maybe, getting her own tiny shop. But more than that, it was a message to every girl like her, every girl who had been told, "You can't," just because she was born with less. Her bags whispered back, "Watch me." And what started as 400 Indian rupees and a few scraps of cloth was slowly turning into something bigger. Because what Mira didn't know was that soon, one of her patchwork bags would end up in the hands of an Instagram influencer. One photo, one tag, and everything would change. But that part of the story comes later. For now, it was just a girl, a sewing machine, a head full of ideas, and the fire to keep showing up, stitch after stitch. She didn't have a map, but she had momentum, and that was enough to take the first step toward something extraordinary. The fabric was old, faded, meant for the trash. But to Mira, it was a blank canvas. Her neighbor, who owned a tiny boutique, often tossed leftover cloth pieces, bright silks, cotton scraps, bits of embroidery too small to be useful in the fashion world. To Mira, it was gold. One evening, she gathered a few colorful scraps, ironed them flat, and laid them out on her floor like a puzzle. She had no formal training, no sketchbook, just an eye for color and a wild imagination. It took her 6 hours and countless needle pricks, but when she was done, she held up something that made her heart skip, her first handmade handbag. It wasn't perfect. The stitching was uneven. The shape was slightly off, but it was bold, vibrant, a blend of traditional patterns with modern flair. She added a lining from an old bedsheet, attached a zipper she had found in her mother's sewing box, and stitched a tiny heart into the corner, her secret symbol of love and defiance. The next morning, she woke before sunrise, wrapped the bag in a cloth, and began walking. 3 miles, through dusty streets, past honking buses and early morning chai stalls. Her destination, the neighborhood flea market, a place where vendors sold everything from plastic buckets to imitation perfumes. She didn't have a table, or a stall, or a license. All she had was a wooden crate she borrowed from the local fruit seller, a torn sheet to sit on, and a piece of cardboard where she hand-painted the words. Handcrafted with love, 200 Indian rupees. She placed a bag on the crate and waited. People passed by. Some slowed down, looked, and kept walking. A few smiled. Others didn't even notice her. One man stopped, glanced at the sign, scoffed, and said, "Indian rupee 200? For that, you should be giving it away." Mira forced a smile. She was used to being underestimated. Hours passed. The sun climbed high. The heat was unbearable. Her throat was dry. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since morning. But she stayed. Because she wasn't just selling a bag. She was selling her belief. Then, just when she began to question herself, it happened. A woman in her mid-30s, wearing a cotton sari and carrying a jute bag, stopped. She picked up Mira's creation, turned it around, examined the stitches, ran her fingers along the seams, and then asked softly, "Did you make this?" Mira nodded. "Yes, Didi. From leftover fabric. It's fully stitched by hand." The woman smiled. "It's different. Raw but full of soul. I'll take it." She reached into her purse and handed over 200 Indian rupees without bargaining. 200 Indian rupees. To most people, it's a casual dinner. To Mira, it felt like $1 million validation. She held the money in her hand like it was fragile. Her eyes welled up, not because she was richer, but because someone believed in her. She ran home that evening, clutching the notes to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Her father asked, "What happened?" She simply said, "I sold a dream today." That night, for the first time in years, they had a full dinner. The next day, Mira stitched another bag. This one had cleaner lines, stronger handles, and then another. By the end of the week, she had made 5 new products, each one more refined than the last. She didn't stop at bags. She stitched jewelry pouches out of old sari borders, laptop sleeves from discarded denim, coin purses made from curtain offcuts. Each item had a touch of Mira, colorful, practical, and deeply rooted in culture. And she did something no one expected. She named each product line. Earth bags, sturdy, earthy tone totes for everyday use soul wraps, vibrant pouches for jewelry and gifts denim diaries, rugged accessories made from jeans. She painted tiny tags and attached them to every piece. Her products didn't just look different, they felt personal. She returned to the flea market every weekend. People began to notice. A few even returned and said, "Do you have more?" Local shopkeepers started offering her tiny corners in their stores. She reinvested everything she earned. No gold, no gadgets, just more needles, better thread, and one new pair of scissors that she treated like treasure. By the end of the second month, she had sold over 30 handmade items, all through word of mouth. No social media, no website, just passion and persistence. Every time she handed over a product, she added a folded note inside. Thank you for supporting handmade dreams. One customer messaged her days later saying, "This bag reminds me of my grandmother's stitching. It made me emotional. I hope you never stop." Mira smiled reading that. She saved that message in a small notebook, alongside every design she had drawn and every sale she had made. That 200 Indian rupees? It didn't just buy her groceries. It bought her confidence. It showed her that creativity can be currency. That even in a world of mass-produced fast fashion, people still cared about stories, about hands behind the seams. And most importantly, it taught her that you don't need perfection to start. You just need heart. By the age of 21, Mira had sold over 500 handmade products. No ads, no marketing agency, just word of mouth. Each bag, pouch, or sleeve carried a piece of her, stitched with late-night effort, early morning hope, and a quiet determination that never seemed to sleep. But Mira wasn't satisfied. She didn't just want her creations on the streets of Kolkata. She wanted them in cities she'd only seen in movies: Paris, New York, Tokyo. She wanted her story, and the stories woven into every thread of her products, to reach across oceans. There was just one problem. She had no idea how to go global. So she turned to the only person she knew who owned a computer, her Uncle Ramesh, a cyber cafe owner. Together, sitting at an old desktop with a sticky keyboard and a barely working mouse, Mira opened an Instagram account. She called it @MiraMade. Her bio was simple: handmade from Kolkata, bags with a soul, stitching dreams into reality. Her first few posts were just photos, flat-lay shots of her bags taken under a tube light. 3 likes, 1 comment, silence. But Mira wasn't new to slow starts. Then, one day, she decided to try something different. She borrowed her cousin's phone, set it on a stack of books, and recorded herself stitching a custom pouch made from recycled denim. No filters, no fancy edits, just her hands moving with precision, the needle threading, the sound of scissors slicing through fabric, and her soft voice explaining the process. "This pouch was made from an old pair of jeans that someone threw away, but I believe everything can be reused. Everything and everyone has value." She uploaded it with the caption, "From waste to wow. #MiraMade." She turned off the phone and went to sleep. The next morning, her inbox was exploding. 20,000 views in 2 days. Hundreds of comments. People asking about prices, shipping, how to order. A woman from Mumbai messaged, "My daughter wants to learn stitching because of your video." Another from Manila wrote, "Do you ship to the Philippines?" Mira's hands shook as she tried to reply to everyone. That one video didn't just go viral. It opened a portal to the world. She took every rupee she had saved and reinvested it. First, she bought a newer, quieter sewing machine, secondhand but faster. Then she hired 2 local women, Sita and Noor, both single mothers, who had been struggling to find steady work. She didn't want to just build a brand. She wanted to build a community. They rented a tiny 6 by 6 room near her home and turned it into a mini workshop. Walls covered in fabric, 1 table, 3 machines, and music always playing in the background. That workshop became a place of laughter, resilience, and shared dreams. Still, Mira knew that Instagram could only go so far. One day, a customer from Delhi told her, "You should be on Etsy. People abroad would love your work." Etsy. She had heard of it, but it felt intimidating. Everything was in dollars. The shipping process was confusing. The fees? Even more confusing. But Mira was used to jumping into the unknown. She spent 2 weeks researching everything: how to list, how to price, how to ship internationally. Her uncle helped translate parts of the platform. Her cousin helped her create product names that sounded global but stayed true to her roots. She listed 10 handmade items: soul patch sling bag, Kolkata Blues laptop sleeve, patchwork poetry tote, earth bloom jewelry pouch. She clicked publish and waited. The first few days? Nothing. Then ping, an email. You've made a sale. A woman in California had ordered the patchwork poetry tote. Mira reread the message 3 times. California? She ran to her father, showing him the screen. That's in America, right? He asked, eyes wide. Mira nodded, still in disbelief. She carefully packed the order in brown paper, tied it with twine, added dried flower petals, and slid in a handwritten note. Thank you for supporting handmade dreams from Kolkata. A few days later, the buyer messaged her. Your bag tells a story. I felt at the moment I touched it. Keep going. Mira stared at those words, heart pounding. Your bag tells a story. That sentence echoed in her mind all night, because suddenly it all made sense. She wasn't just selling bags. She was selling stories. Stories of resilience, of transformation, of second chances, just like the scraps of cloth she stitched together into something beautiful. Every piece she made wasn't just fabric. It was a message. Where you start doesn't define where you'll go. With that realization, everything changed. She stopped calling herself just a maker. She was now a brand, a storyteller, a social entrepreneur. She redesigned her Instagram with behind-the-scenes videos, stories of the women she worked with, the history of fabric she used. People connected deeply, not just to the product, but to the purpose. Soon, media outlets started picking up her story. Blogs called her India's patchwork queen. One article labeled her the girl who stitched her way to Silicon Valley. But Mira stayed grounded. She still stitched every day. She still walked to the post office herself. Because in her heart, she was still that girl with a dream, 5 Indian rupees, and a sewing machine. Only now the world was watching. With every sale, Mira learned something new. She wasn't just building a business, she was building trust, craftsmanship, and a deep relationship with every customer who clicked by. She studied late into the night with a borrowed laptop. How to make packaging memorable. How to build a handmade brand. How to make customers feel valued. Then she took action. She started wrapping each item in recycled cloth scraps, colorful, patterned, full of character. She tied them with jute string and included a handwritten thank you note that read, "This piece was stitched with care and hope. Thank you for being part of our journey." And with every third order from a returning customer, she added a tiny surprise, a handmade bracelet, crafted from leftover beads and threads. No branding, no sales pitch, just genuine love. And people noticed. Customers didn't just buy her products, they felt them. They shared unboxing videos, tagged her in posts, wrote paragraphs about how this felt like a gift from a friend. Her following grew. Her reviews glowed, and her orders doubled, then tripled. By the age of 24, Mira had moved out of her tiny workspace and into a modest but vibrant studio. And she wasn't stitching alone anymore. She had a 10-woman team, each one hired from backgrounds just like hers. Women who had once worked as domestic helpers, tailors in sweatshops, or simply had no opportunities at all. Women who were quietly talented but systemically overlooked. Together, they did more than sew. They dreamed, they designed, and they built something beautiful. They gave themselves a name that meant something. Thread and Soul. Their mission? To turn waste fabric into wearable art and empower women with every stitch. The idea was simple but powerful. Sparkles used leftover textiles from boutiques and tailors. Sparkles handcraft each item with unique Indian patterns and styles. Sparkles create livelihood and dignity for every woman behind the stitch. Mira didn't want to just sell things. She wanted to change things. And slowly, the world started paying attention. In early 2023, something unbelievable happened. She received an email from the Global Eco-Fashion Summit in Berlin, Germany. They had seen her Instagram reels, read the write-ups about her brand, and wanted her to speak at their summit as a rising voice in sustainable fashion. Mira was stunned. She had never even left Kolkata. She didn't own a passport. But a few weeks later, after rushing paperwork and borrowing a suitcase, Mira stood at the airport with passport trembling in her hand. looking up at a screen that read Flight to Berlin. When the plane lifted off the tarmac, she whispered, "Ma, I'm flying." Berlin was cold. She wore a jacket stitched from old sari cloth. She felt out of place among fashion executives in suits and heels. But when her moment came, her presentation, she stood tall on stage in her handcrafted kurta and spoke with honesty. "I didn't go to fashion school. I didn't grow up around design. I grew up around scarcity. But I believe fashion can lift people, not just profits. Every bag we make carries not just cloth, but a story." She ended her speech with a simple line. "We don't just sell products. We stitch futures." The room went silent. Then a standing ovation. People came up to her afterward with tears in their eyes. Some placed bulk orders. Others offered collaborations. But most simply said, "Thank you. You reminded us why we started." From that point on, Thread and Soul became more than a boutique brand. It became a movement. Globe Showing Europe Africa Shopify featured her under Top Women Entrepreneurs to Watch. Globe Showing Europe Africa BuzzFeed published a story titled, "She started with 400 Indian rupees and a needle. Now she's taking on fast fashion." Globe Showing Europe Africa Vogue India called her a rising voice for sustainable luxury. Big retailers reached out. TV interviews rolled in. Workshops requested her as a speaker. But Mira stayed grounded. She didn't sign big contracts with fast fashion giants who wanted to mass-produce her designs without employing her women. She set firm values, fair pay, local sourcing, zero exploitation. In the next year, Thread and Soul grew to a 40-woman team across 2 states. They trained new recruits, opened Sew School, a free tailoring program for girls from slum communities, launched a village-based embroidery revival project to save dying art forms. They even introduced a special collection that came with a mini storybook. Each piece matched with the personal story of the woman who made it. Customers didn't just wear the bags. They felt proud to carry them, because every thread had a soul behind it. And Mira, she still stitches. Not every day, but often enough to remind herself of where it began, a one-room house, a borrowed sewing machine, and a wild dream stitched between hunger and hope. A journalist once asked her, "Do you feel like you've made it?" She smiled and replied, "Making it isn't about money. It's about making meaning. If even one girl with 400 Indian rupees and no hope watches my story and says, 'If she can do it, maybe I can too,' then yes, I've made it." Today, Thread and Soul is no longer just a homegrown dream stitched in a one-room house. It's a movement. Their handmade creations now travel across 17 countries, carried in the hands of artists, entrepreneurs, and everyday people who feel a connection to something real, something made with meaning. But behind the beauty of every product is something deeper, purpose. Over the past few years, Mira and her team have upcycled more than 12,000 kilos of textile waste, scraps, cuttings, rejected batches that would have ended up in landfills. Instead, these forgotten fabrics have been turned into tote bags, laptop sleeves, scrunchies, and accessories worn by people across the world. Even more powerful, the people making them. Through free training and employment programs, Thread and Soul has empowered over 200 women from rural and underserved communities across India. Many of them had never used a sewing machine. Some had never left their village. A few were widows or young mothers without support. Now they are designers, earners, creators. Some have opened stalls at local huts. Others have started mini boutiques or send their daughters to school with their income. Some women even mentor the next batch of artisans, passing on not just skills, but belief. Because belief is what started it all. But even as Thread and Soul grows, new collections, global collabs, press features, Mira hasn't changed in the ways that count. She still lives in the same part of Kolkata, though her home is now brighter and bigger. And once every month, she goes somewhere most people have forgotten. The flea market. Not to sell, not to shop, not even to network. She goes to sit quietly on the same wooden crate where she sold her first bag for 200 Indian rupees. The market's still noisy. The same rusted tin roof. The same dusty paths. New faces. New sellers. But for Mira, it's like time freezes for a moment. She watches young girls laying out handmade things, bracelets, soft toys, paintings, and hoping for someone to stop. Just one person. Just one sale. She knows exactly what they're feeling. That mix of hope and doubt. That voice in your head asking, "Am I good enough?" And that's why she comes back. "I never want to forget where I started," she says. "Because that place didn't just break me. It built me." In an interview, a journalist once asked her, "What kept you going in the beginning, when no one noticed, when you had no money, no help, and no roadmap?" She paused, then replied with a calm strength in her voice, "When you start with nothing, every step forward is a miracle. I didn't wait for perfect. I started with passion, and I never stopped." Those words have become the unofficial motto at Thread and Soul. They're painted in soft cursive on the walls of their Mumbai studio, printed on the back of their packaging slips, spoken aloud in every orientation session for new women joining the program. Because Mira's journey isn't just about fashion. It's not even just about business. It's about the power of starting, the courage to believe in your idea, even if it's small, even if it's imperfect, even if you don't have everything figured out. She didn't go to fashion school. She didn't have rich investors. She didn't have a polished pitch deck or marketing plan. She had 400 Indian rupees, a borrowed sewing machine, a second-hand phone, and a dream that wouldn't go away. Most people wait until they're ready. But Mira, she started scared. She started alone. She started small. And that's what makes her story unforgettable. Because it's real. It's relatable. It proves something every dreamer needs to hear. You don't need $1 million to start. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't even need everyone's approval. What you do need is fire. That quiet, stubborn flame that says, "I can, and I will." Today, Thread and Soul is more than a business. It's a message sewn into every stitch. You are not your circumstances. You are your vision, your grit, your willingness to begin anyway. Mira's next goal: to open community design hubs in 5 states across India. Free spaces with machines, fabric, internet, and mentorship where any woman with an idea can come, create, and build something of her own. Because Mira knows, it's not enough to succeed alone. You have to turn your success into a bridge, so others can cross.